Dive in the deep end, it's time to defend your movie.
Hello, friends, and welcome to this week's episode of Defending Your Movie. I am your host, Jeremy Meyer. So this week's show is the first of probably many of movies that'll pop up like this, but this is not actually an underrated film. You know, it's a movie that has like an over 80% on Rotten Tomatoes and for the most part is widely considered to be a good film. But this is a good example of movies that will be on the show that, you know, are not considered like bad movies or diamonds in the rough or something, but just a movie that someone is very passionate about. And that someone this week is another of the Montressor Media friends I have made, and that is Aerin Moriarty. Aerin, as part of being the Film Rescue Show, also has a podcast called the Palate Cleanser Podcast. Not to mention a couple YouTube series based around the Loki television show, Loki After Dark, and one abbreviated as LSD. I don't really want to say the name of it here, not because I'm anything bad about the name, but just because like algorithms and such can mess with your show if you swear in the beginning. And this is going to be one of the first intros where I don't swear in the beginning, trying to make a habit of that. But Aerin was one of the first people to volunteer for the podcast and was actually the first recurring guest, even though the second episode hasn't aired yet. But had a really, picked a movie, and you can see it in the title. We're talking about Pride and Prejudice, but I had never seen this movie. It wasn't generally my type of jam. And, Aerin picked the movie because, for one, really likes it, but was just kind of curious about somebody who's kind of out of the target audience for the movie how they would feel about it. So, we watched this movie, and I have to say, I did enjoy it way more than I expected. And Aerin is very passionate about the movie and has a lot of great opinions about it. So without further ado, we're going to get into the episode because I do think it is a really good one with some really great conversation. Aerin is a great guest and always happy to have on the show. But first, let's get the plugs out of the way. As usual, you can check out our social medias at Defending Movie. We do have our merch store at belowthecollar.com/defending your movie, and our Patreon, patreon.com/defending your movie. Actually, I want to double check that because I think I have said the Patreon wrong a couple times. I just want to be sure. Patreon.com/defending movie, not defending your. I don't know why I did that. I should have just did defending your movie. But without further ado, let's get into this wonderful discussion about Pride and Prejudice. All right, so first I want to thank you for hopping on my show.
You're very welcome.
And having me watch a movie that's a little out of my wheelhouse, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and I made sure that I asked.
Oh yeah, no, it's fine. That's kind of the joy of the show is it's gonna so I'm recording 2 today, and both are movies I have not seen, so that's kind of fun for me. And the first episode I recorded a few days ago, the guest had not seen the movie, so for me that's kind of the fun part. Is that the whole point of this is to introduce people to movies that they may have not seen before.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and I dropped this one under the category of movie I would take my wife to see at the theater, and I'm like, well, I'll just enjoy my popcorn while she enjoys the movie, and then I usually end up liking it more than she does.
I can relate to those situations too.
Yeah, like very much Little Women vibes as I was watching this, because that was our experience seeing that movie.
Yeah. I feel like this movie kind of really got a bad rap. I made you watch the trailer after watching the movie. The trailer is like it's for a completely different film.
Oh, absolutely. It felt like a romantic comedy aimed at teens.
Yeah.
And I was like, just like the music choice in the beginning and stuff was just like, oh, this is not the same thing.
It felt really targeted at a younger audience, which I think that this is one of those films where I think most people who are fairly introspective, that have been in at least 1 or 2 relationships, that like films, could like Pride and Prejudice, but I don't think enough people give it. It's interesting because I feel like historical romances very seldomly attract interest outside of their niche. Like people that are already looking for historical romances go to historical romances. Every once
Yeah.
in a while, you'll have something big like Little Women that breaks out and kind of becomes a little bit more mainstream. But, in the middle, you'll have a million like Emmas and Persuasions and things like that
Like
that
Age
come
of
out.
Adeline, does that one qualify? I
Oh,
never
you know
saw
what?
that.
I, I don't know if that's it's not really a period piece, but it's definitely one of those dramas that maybe would appeal to more of a femme audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I have not seen a lot of movies like this, and usually when I do, like I said, it's my wife's choice for our
mhm.
theater pick that time. But I'm certainly not opposed to it, and I did enjoy the movie. I
Yeah.
will just get that out there. I didn't like love it because it did make me feel kind of stupid sometimes. Just because it's spoken and written in the time period that it's from, so it's a lot of like I don't understand what anybody is saying, but I get
Yeah.
the feelings they're putting across.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I feel like in the modern day, especially, you really have to watch movies like this multiple times and watch them with the captions on. Because now that I've seen this movie thousands of times, probably, like I just notice a lot of like little wit that probably just like slips under the radar a little bit more. And I I I really love how you get that additional value from reviewing it because of that additional language barrier. Like initially when I was younger, when I was in high school, I hated things like Shakespeare because I'm like, oh, the language is a barrier. Like, I mean,
yeah.
if people are acting in front of me, then sure, like I get it. But I, I've learned as I've gotten older that I really like work that I can get more value out of because I want to have that like that same feeling over and over and over again. And I like that the first time you watch this movie, you get the emotions just because Kira and Matt are just fucking phenomenal at emoting.
They're really great. Like their performances were very captivating. Like in what's his name? Tom
Mhm.
Hollander as Mr. Collins. I liked him
Yeah.
a lot just because he is, for one, I was like, oh, it's kind of a Pirates of the Caribbean reunion because he was the villain in those
Yep.
second two movies. But he's great in this as kind of just like the comic relief.
Yeah. Yeah, but then as you rewatch it more, like then you start enjoying it because you see like in any given time, a lot of times you have many characters on screen, so you're watching the reactions to the action and you're getting more of the story that way. And then as you watch it more times, the inaccessibility of the language becomes less of a thing and you understand, oh wait, this is what they're saying. And you get how witty that they're like the banter that Mr. Darcy and Lizzie have going back and forth so quickly is it's just so intelligent. And once you understand like everything they're saying, you can really feel how intelligent they are and how well matched they are.
Yeah, and I did like a little bit of like digging into the story like after I
Hmm.
watched it, just because like I this is the first interaction I've had with anything kind of Jane Austen, and
Yeah.
like I said, I kind of felt a little dumb watching it. A lot of this is going over my head. Like I'm understanding what's going on, but I was like, oh, they're saying a lot of stuff that is just kind of going in one ear and out the other.
Hmm.
But getting to the kind of point of, oh, this is just how first impressions can really ruin a relationship. And I guess
Yeah.
originally the story, instead of being called Pride and Prejudice, I saw was originally called First Impressions.
Yeah. I'm glad they changed the title, to be honest, because I
Yeah.
think this title fits it better.
Yeah, Pride
Because
and Prejudice is a much catchier title.
yeah. And I think it does go into a little bit more than just first impressions. I think that first impressions doesn't even give her own work enough credit because one of the things that I like about this film is how consistently it films like this are slow burns. Like you've probably not watched a lot of them, but because you really only get one kiss and it's at the end, and generally when they are engaged or married, you've got to keep the audience's attention for a 2-hour film or a 7-part miniseries, as the case may be,
Yeah.
with a lot of other things. So that like slow burn is kind of a I don't know how to it's just like ever
Yeah.
present.
Yeah, and honestly, I was surprised that the runtime was only 2 hours. Like when I was
Mhm.
getting ready to watch the movie, I'm like, oh, I was just expecting it to be a 2.5 hour movie. But I
Yeah.
forgot this is 2005, I think. And,
Mhm.
we weren't really doing that back then.
Not
Like,
not yet.
I guarantee if this movie came out like last year or something, it probably would have been 2.5 hours. And honestly, I kind of wish it was, which is a weird thing to say because I do
Yeah.
like there are a lot of characters in the movie. And I
Yes.
never really understood like who Carey Mulligan's character was until like I kind of went and looked at it like online like
Yeah.
afterwards. Like I'm like, oh, some of these characters, they're all there and there's like a lot of talking going on at once. And I'm just like,
Mhm.
I understand all the main characters, so as long as I have something to focus on, I'm fine. But I was
Yeah.
like, I would like to understand more of who these characters are.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of and on successive watchings you realize that from the very beginning, like the very first trip into town, they're talking about officers even before like Wickham really doesn't become an element of the story until act 2, and then he really doesn't become a problem until act 3.
Yeah, he's barely in the movie, to be honest, but
Yeah,
he
and he's
becomes this huge focal point later on.
exactly, he's the catalyst for everything. It just makes everything go boom. Um, I do think you should watch this like again with your wife because I do think that
I
she
was
would
actually
probably love it.
curious if she would be into this, like as we were
Yeah,
watching it.
and B, I think you would get more out of it, especially after talking about it because I said earlier that this movie it unfurls like a delicate flower, to use a shitty metaphor.
Yeah,
There are so many ways that it does that though. It's so information dense in ways you don't realize. Um, Costumes is one of the big ones. So like blue is a color that's very heavily associated with love in this story. Like any of the characters that are in love, like when Lydia and Wickham get back from their marriage, they're in a blue carriage and they're wearing blue and
yeah,
white.
yeah. He's got a
Um
blue jacket and everything.
mhm. When you first see Lizzie and Darcy, so Lizzie always wears earth tones and occasionally sky blue when she's in love, and when she's near Darcy, sky blue. Darcy always wears black. And like as they loosen up and lighten up, both of the colors of their outfits and like the fit of their outfits become looser and lighter.
I did notice that specifically with him, like towards the end of his
Uh-huh.
movie. Yeah, how is it, like you said, like it's looser, like
Yeah.
his outfit was just like flowing more.
Exactly. It's very pronounced. And she has that very big scene, like this turning point scene where she's just standing on a cliff and her hair and her clothing are just blowing in the wind. And you realize that she's just opening up. And I love how, since you don't get internal narration, since you have Lizzie, who is a character that goes from being around 5 other characters somebody to open up to, you're saying so many things with clothing.
Yeah, yeah. It's helpful because they're like I said, there's a lot going on. Like
Yeah.
it's weird because there's so many characters, but if you really just kind of like look at the events of the story, there's not like
Mhm.
a lot that happens. It's like, just like kind of a bunch of parties and people meeting, and then like big events are even happening kind of off screen, like the whole
Mhm.
thing with what's the soldier's name,
Wickham.
Wickham, and then which one does he end up with?
He ends
Lydia.
up with Lydia. Yes,
Yeah,
there's too many sisters. Even I struggle with the names.
yeah. And like that, like it's just like, oh, she just gets a letter that, oh, they kind of ran off together, and
Mhm.
it's not even anything you see, and we haven't even seen Wickham at this point for like an hour in the movie.
Yeah, because it's not important what happens. What matters is how Darcy respond and Lizzie respond to it. And I think Jane Austen really understood that as a writer because the book is very much written. This is a very faithful to the book retelling. The weird thing about the novel, I read the novel after seeing the movie.
I
I
was gonna ask if you had
expected
read the book.
Yeah, I expected like this big proposal at the end that was written out in this like florid writing, but Jane Austen didn't write a tremendous amount of dialogue, and by the time you get to the second proposal, it was basically like, yeah, just Darcy came by, it was raining, I kissed his hands, they were cold, I said yes. It's like,
Yeah,
what?
and that's pretty much exactly what happens in the movie.
Just with a little bit more language.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's not like many. There's kind of one big dialogue heavy
Yeah.
moment, and that's when they're kind of arguing in the rain, where you find out
Mhm.
that he's the one that split up her sister and Wickham, or not
Yeah.
Wickham. Sorry,
Well, Jane and Dodge, Bingley.
Bingley. Yeah, like that's kind of only the real, I guess, like monologue-y moment of the movie, even though there is like a lot of dialogue, but it's the only two time people are just kind of going.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's just like you said, it's a lot of characters being very quick and clever and witty.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you'll have like these long. This film is very indulgent. I think you would agree.
Yeah.
This is one of those films where like they know that the source material and the is good and the actors are going to carry it, so they can get away with doing a lot. And they had the best possible locations. Like, a lot of people do like the BBC version of Pride and Prejudice, and it is good for a lot of reasons, I will agree.
Hmm.
But in terms of sheer like the quality of the locations, the costumes aren't realistic to the time period, but they are fitting for the characters. They're appropriate. They convey the story better. The way, like, you have this long introduction where you don't have Lizzie say a single word, but she walks a long way. She's interacting with nature. You see, like, she's grinning in the sunbeam. She's reading a book. And in that, you convey basically everything that you need to about her character before she said a word in the first minute. And then you see all of her family members just like doing one or two like little lines that kind of displays something about their character. And like, Mary's playing the piano kind of mediocrely, and she kind of does like
I loved all the stuff they did with her. Like, they're
Yeah.
always kind of just ragging on her for not being great at the piano.
Yeah, I kind of as the autistic kid, I'm like, oh, Mary's the autistic kid.
Yeah.
Because Mary wants to play music, and Mary's like, oh yes, mountains and rocks and trees. That's more interesting than boys by far. That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. I'm like, yes, Mary, I agree. Mary is me in this situation. But anyway, you see Lizzie responding to that. So you establish so much about her and her character before anybody says a word.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of like background storytelling with the characters kind of going on, like the whole piano thing. Like there are totally like jokes and moments about
There's a
that you
piano
could totally
arc.
miss. Yeah, and like I think it's when they're at the party and she's playing and they just like kind of force her to stop. It's like, nobody wants to hear it right now or whatever. And she's just like, but like she's upset about it and like
Yeah.
crying about it.
It's like her one opportunity.
Yeah. And that kind of just is always going on in the background throughout the movie, and you could totally miss it. Like, I'm sure there's moments of it I missed.
It's one of those things where you could tell that all of the actors got into their characters' heads and that they were aware where their characters were. And this is one of the great uses of great cinematography, great locations, because you have these balls, several balls, and every single one, all of the characters that are important that are at the ball, you see multiple times. It's not in any way that feels contrived. The camera is just naturally following the action and flowing around, and the actors and actresses are just staying in character. So one minute you see Mary on the piano and she sucks, and this isn't going on in the background, and you're not paying that much attention. And then the next, you're seeing the father drag her away in like, a scene 10 minutes later. And then in a scene 3 minutes later, you see just for a brief second, the father is comforting her as she's crying. And it's like just the continuity and the detail orientedness of this film. Like, if you like a detail film, like just this.
Yeah, like you said, like watching this multiple times, I could easily see like if you're really into it, like there's so much stuff you could be noticing.
Exactly.
And I do think a lot of that goes out to how good the cast is, because it is a really good cast. And like I didn't really look at the cast list going in. I kind of just like, well, I knew Keira Knightley was in it, and I look, I'm like, oh, like Donald Sutherland and like baby Rosamund Pike and Judi Dench shows up. Like
Rosamund Pike is brilliant. This was like
great.
her like breakout role.
Yeah, and I think I looked, it was like her third movie or something like that.
That said, I mean, expecting her to be doe-eyed and stunningly beautiful and the ingenue wasn't really a stretch for her, but she delivers in spades.
Yeah, and honestly, she doesn't even have that much screen time either. Like the movie is mostly following Keira Knightley's character, but like when everybody shows up, they're incredibly present, and when the spotlight needs to be on them, they know what to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like Donald Sutherland delivers a masterful performance and his arc. So each character has an arc that is successfully completed. I would say Kitty really doesn't get much because her arc is really just she's the straight man in this situation with the lost girls is what I call the three youngest.
Yeah.
She's the quote unquote straight man comedically. Donald Sutherland's character arc is I've raised 5 daughters. I have no fucking clue what's going to happen when I die. Dear sweet God, can I just have some peaceful fishing before I finally croak?
Yeah, and like all that kind of plays into something I didn't expect about the movie is that it was a lot funnier than I expected.
Yes.
Like all the stuff with Mr. Collins, like him just being short and awkward, and there's a lot of awkwardness in this movie of everybody just not sure what to do in the moment, but just kind of rolling with it.
Do you know my favorite scene, like the most relatable moment to me?
Huh.
It's towards the end where Bingley is showing up after a long period of being away, and the girls are just fucking
Oh, that was hilarious.
all but tits out in the drawing room, and they have to just put everything away in a hurry, get themselves put together, and like you see them like in utter chaos. The camera cuts to Bingley for just a second, and then you see the room, it's spotless, the women are polished and put together, and it's like, yes.
And they're all just like perfectly spread throughout the room and stand in unit. That was honestly the funniest part of the movie. Like just that scene where they're all standing there and like standing up and bowing. I was like, oh, this is hilarious.
Yes, that was me. Like when I was at friends' houses and like dorms when like the boyfriend would show up.
Yeah.
And we would all just be like, oh shit, hide this.
Yeah, like it's funny because like I've been on the other side of that. So like I think we were watching Bridesmaids, and there's that scene in the beginning where she gets up and like puts makeup on or whatever, and then goes back in bed. My wife was like, oh yeah, when we were dating I totally did stuff like that, and I was like, really? Like I just didn't know.
Oh, it's so funny. I love things like that. And this is a good, like, kind of like breaking the veil situation where I think this is one of those movies that like guys who like filmmaking could be brought to this movie to like kind of get understanding more about like the femme side of romance. It's a little bit outdated, but a lot of the same principles remain true.
Yeah, and so like I have found myself in the last couple of years, my wife and I have been married about 4 years now, and we're trying to have kids, and so like I can't watch a Disney movie without crying anymore.
Oh,
like every Disney movie, like every Pixar movie will make me cry.
Oh, you're like, I'm gonna be a dad and I'm gonna show my kid one day.
And
I bet. That's so sweet.
Like I saw Up for the first time like 3 or 4 months ago, and it was actually we were watching it at work, and the whole first 10 minutes of that movie is just literally the saddest thing ever, and I'm like, this movie's all right, like over in the corner.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, so like the scene where they finally come together at the end, like it almost got me. Like that's where it's going, but it's still just really well done.
Exactly.
And the production of the movie is really good, like a lot of really beautiful like vistas and stuff of wherever they're filming. Like on a production level, it's really great. Yeah, and the music, honestly, very good. It did stand out to me. Sometimes on a first watch of a movie, the music might pass me, and that's the thing I'll notice on the like further watches, but a lot of it did really stand out to me.
The music even has a story arc, specifically one song. The song that Lizzie plays at Catherine de Bourgh's place, that's one of the songs that Mary plays a lot, and Mary plays it specifically fairly well at the very beginning, and we know that Mary is an adequate pianist.
Yeah.
So when we see Lizzie kind of like fumble through it, and I like that because a lot of times when I see other productions of Pride and Prejudice, they'll have Lizzie play a classical song poorly, and if you don't really know classical music, you can't tell if somebody's playing it well or not. Is it supposed to be deliberately bad at that section? Like maybe. And I loved that they paid attention to those little elements that people who aren't necessarily like. I've seen other tellings of this movie. Another good example of this is I've seen other tellings of this movie just assume that audiences are going to understand how bad it would be if the house just went to Mr. Collins and Mr. Collins just left them destitute.
Yeah.
This movie goes out to express this. It expresses a lot of things, but without hitting you over the head with it and making you feel like an idiot. And I love those elements.
Yeah, and actually even just that little bit you were talking about with the piano stuff reminds me of another moment I like in the movie, which is just like a little dialogue moment, but it's the difference between very well and fairly well.
Yes.
When she's like, oh, she said you plays very well. I was like, oh, I said fairly well. She's like, oh, well, give me the proper amount of credit.
And she is just the best at these impudent little side smirks. And
oh, she's great.
Yes, it's just watching as the movie progresses, like, first, the only person that can really get them out of her is Jane, but then she's opening up to more people as the movie progresses, and I'm like, "Oh, Lizzie."
Yeah, like I always forget like how good Keira Knightley is.
Mhm.
Like I haven't seen a lot of her movies. Like I'm a big fan of those like first three Pirates movies and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I mean she was in like the first Star Wars, but I don't know where this was in her career, like how much she had under her belt by this time.
Very early in her career, I
Yeah.
think it was after the first Pirates, I wanna say. It was either right before or right after, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. I think time-wise that I think
Because
it maybe two at that point. Because I think the
because
second one might have been 2004.
I always thought Orlando Bloom would have been a better Wickham. I'm not super into Wickham. I don't think him and Keira
Yeah.
Knightley have any chemistry at all.
I
And
felt the same way.
when you have her and Matthew McFadden, whose the name I'm desperately hoping I'm remembering correctly, um, they have just the strongest, most intense chemistry. So even when their characters hate each other on screen and are barely speaking, it's still like, dude, you guys are gonna fuck, right?
Yeah, like I really liked how he just had this like shyness about him. It felt
Yeah.
like he's this supposed rich guy and everything, so everybody just assumes like, oh, he's got it all together, but
Yeah.
even he just seems like he doesn't really know how to handle a situation where
Yeah.
he's like, I clearly have feelings for this woman, but like
Exactly.
I don't know what to do about it.
Yes, the worst thing is to have feelings for this woman, so I must push her far away as possible.
Yeah. And and it is based off a book, and I do wish they kind of went more into why he might feel that way. And I get the title kind of lays it out there, the pride and the prejudice between the two characters and stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like I said, I almost wish this was 2.5 hours, just because like I could have
Mhm.
used more of each of these characters.
Exactly. I would have watched at the 4-hour cut of this film. I mean, really, because Keira Knightley, like, brash, witty period woman who defies expectation is just, like, really where just she just is in that zone, and Matthew McFadden can play these just, like, deeply layered, soulful male characters that can go from being, like, "I'm suave and sexy" one moment, but can also be, like, "I'm shy and don't actually know how to talk to women" the other another minute, and when you put that combination together on film, and this was really before one of the reasons I like Keira Knightley in this so much is because this was before you had, like, a lot of CGI in a lot of these movies and
Yeah.
longer shots, like, when the 2 characters are together on frame, it's close shots, it's so intense and intimate.
Yeah, very, very intimate. And I was wondering the same thing because like there's the scene where the soldiers are kind of coming down the street, and I'm like,
Mhm.
this definitely looks like a set. And like, if this was made now, it's like, oh, the first two buildings might be real and
Mhm.
everything else would be CG.
Yeah.
But older movies like
Nearly the
this,
whole
that
film was
stuff
on
really,
location.
yeah, and that stuff really pays off. Like,
Yes.
and that's what to me when I watch I remember when I watched Force Awakens for the first time, I was like,
Mhm.
oh, this is a big blockbuster movie coming out in, I think, what was that, 2015?
Something like
And
that, yeah.
you can tell how much of it was real and practical.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the best thing I could say about like blockbusters and stuff that are coming out now is when they do the extra. And I think that's why it's stuff like Mad Max Fury Road catches on so
Mhm.
hard, because hey, it's real.
I have this theory that the brain engages better with natural things on film than it does with CGI.
Oh, 1,000%.
At least in terms of, like, every single neurodivergent person that I've asked that has agreed with me. So I'm
Yeah.
pretty certain that's true. I
And
I this film, like, it takes advantage of a location better than, like, the huge dance scenes in this film were they got a building that existed when this was written, they took the dance hall and they filled it with actors who they trained to do the dances. There's That's the only way you get something that looks and feels, and here's the most important thing, sounds that authentic. The
yeah.
sound in those big scenes, like, yeah, sure, there are parts where, yeah, there's, like, enhancement on the leads and voices and things like that. you can tell that a lot of that was recorded, room sounds and such, that was on location rather than like Foley and the like, because it fits what you're looking at perfectly.
Yeah, and another one of my favorite scenes was her when they're dancing in the party, and her
I
and
love that.
Mr. Collins is like trying to have a conversation with her. It's just like, how are you supposed to do it when you're like moving around the room, and
Mm-hmm.
she's kind of not paying attention to him because she's talking to her sister.
Mm-hmm. She doesn't really realize what she's doing because of the height disparity too.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot how short that guy is, because like in the
Yeah.
pirate movie, which is the only thing I think I've seen him in, they don't really like linger on the fact that he's like a short guy.
Yeah.
But then watching him walk up behind like Mr. Darcy and like tapping him on the shoulder like a little kid, I'm just like, oh, this guy is ridiculous.
Oh, and they pull back the framing on that so far. They know
Yeah.
exactly. Like I did mention the close-ups, but they will do a long shot, and I like this. I don't remember who did the cinematography on it, but it is excellent in just really. There are so many parts of this film that I have taken and made wallpapers for my desktop out of, and they basically look like Renaissance paintings.
Yeah. I'm looking up the cinematographer because I happen to have the Wikipedia page open, and I'm not really recognizing anything else they've done. It's somebody named Roman Osen or Osen. And yeah, I mean, it's a few movies on here, but nothing I'm recognizing. This definitely seems, actually there is a really bad horror movie on there I saw. But yeah, this is probably the biggest movie on the list.
Yeah.
Oh, it did do Heath Ledger's last movie, I believe.
Oh.
Oh, never mind. No, sorry, wrong movie. I'll say I don't think he died in 2007. It's I was very surprised at how much I kind of enjoyed this movie, because as I said, it's not my typical bag, but I'm always willing to give everything a chance. And me and my wife did go see Little Women, which was the first kind of movie like this, and I really fucked up because I've never read that book. The most I knew about Little Women was in the Friends episode where they talk about it. She mentions that one of the characters dies. And so I was like, okay, so I know at some point in this movie somebody dies, but I didn't look up what that movie was like about. So like the screenwriting part of my brain was watching that movie, like looking for the time codes, like, all right, we're like 10 minutes in, we're 15 minutes in, like, what is the plot of this movie? And I should have just like read the log line before going in, and I didn't. So I made sure I did that with this one, just because like with movies like this, they don't typically have like a standard plot. There's not the same kind of beats you'll get with like a normal movie, just because like the stories are a little more like they're not as complex, and it's kind of just telling somebody's life.
Yeah, and I was just thinking this movie would be really weird if you didn't necessarily, if you're not super familiar with this genre and you've got this Lizzie character, but most of the action seems to center around the other characters, especially at first.
Yeah, because it is a lot of just seeing how her family is kind of affecting her life.
Yeah.
And there is the underlying theme of her and Mr. Darcy's relationship, but a lot of it is just her being the kind of like backbone for her family.
Yeah, and really the toll that is put on her life. And like you see that the first time when I think by the time Mr. Darcy proposes the first time in the rain, which is a fucking stunning well done scene. The acting is great. The two thunderclaps that just perfectly accentuate like the most important lines of dialogue. But where the fuck was I going with that? Oh, when you hear him say, "Oh yeah, I basically burned your relationship, or I burned your sister's relationship because I didn't like your family, and pretty much the whole reason that my proposal to you sucks is because I don't respect your family." And you're like, "Oh heck, if she was born in a family that was like, Charlotte Lucas, she probably had a pretty normal family." She was born in the Lucas family. It would have probably been easy. She would have been like, "Oh, okay, this is Mrs. Darcy," and he's like, "Oh, wow, I'm shy and I don't really know how to handle this, but I'm attracted to you. So, maybe we should get married or something."
Yeah, and like I can totally understand why somebody would be put off by this woman's family, because her mother is kind of crazy.
Yeah,
and just like forcing everyone into these, like trying to get everyone married.
Ooh, and you know what? That's another thing that becomes more apparent on rewatching. At first, it seems kind of petty that Mr. Darcy, as rich as he is concerned about her family. But if you pay attention to Darcy, like the only time that he's really himself is around his sister, and you realize how
Yeah.
important family is to him. And like Wickham's betrayal of family was like a huge, huge thing for him. And I like accepting somebody else into his family, especially as like the matriarch of like who's going to birth his children. Like I can see him being concerned of what family structure she had come from and like everything like that.
Yeah, like the scene where she's spying on his sister playing piano, and you see him just kind of like run up and be all excited. Like you've never
Mhm.
seen him act like that during the movie. He's
Yeah,
always
he's the
just
little
this
boy.
straight, proper guy.
Yep.
And yeah, watching him with his sister, it's like, oh, this is him in his element, and you can see how much he actually cares.
Yes. He's so sweet with her, and that's like the moment when you're like, "Wait, this guy is actually like genuinely like good." And in that moment, he's wearing like the lightest he's like wearing like almost a medium blue, which is the lightest color he wears the entire film, and she's wearing a cream, which is the lightest dress she wears the entire movie. And Georgiana, I think in that scene she's wearing light blue. I think in the next one she's wearing white. So it's like this very bright, uplifting moment because like family is just this prime motivator in his life.
Yeah, and it's weird because like that was something in my own marriage that
Mhm.
like I kind of bumped into because like I don't know, my family is just kind of like we all know we're all fine, we're all just kind of doing our thing. Like we weren't super close, but my wife's family was all like really close. Like to me it was super weird that like when we would spend time together, like if I was staying over their house on the weekends back when we were dating, on like Sunday morning, they would all like hang out in the living room and just chat. And I'm just like, this is really weird. But like, I don't know. That was probably the most normal thing I was encountering.
Yeah. You know, on a semi-related note, I've been on dates with dudes like Mr. Collins. Oof. Uh,
He's just trying so hard.
it's sad because he's like you get the feeling that, you know, he's intelligent, he's well-read, he's interested in his garden and everything like that, and you get the feeling that if he would stop, like, stumbling over his own ass trying to be like Joe Badass, he
Yeah.
would actually be a good dude, and that Charlotte would be okay. Like, that's actually the one thread that I wish they would have tied back up. Like, I think that it would have been nice if Mr. Collins would have just, like, learned how to take a chill pill, like, after, you know, well, I guess it really doesn't fit because the movie ends pretty quick after this point, but, like, after Lizzie tells off Catherine, he should be like, "You know what? I just realized, you know what? Aristocrats, they're not all that much."
Yeah. And also, okay, maybe I misunderstood this, but and also it was a different time. But
Mhm.
are her and Mr. Collins related, Lizzie?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he is a distant cousin, I
Yeah.
believe. Like I don't think because they're not like well acquainted when he shows up, like they've never met before.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely a different time though, because Catherine de Bourgh refers to fucking what's his face Darcy as her nephew, and at birth he was betrothed to her daughter, who
Oh yeah,
probably
she
is
does mention
sickly.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, who probably is sickly because of the whole incest thing would be
Yeah.
my inference.
Which is not even a character that's in the movie, right? They just mention her daughter.
Oh no, she's in black.
Oh, well, yeah, that's right. That
Yeah,
girl.
you see her very briefly. She's very sickly
Yeah.
looking, and she's at the nursing. Um,
Which I did laugh at. I was like, oh, this character that clearly has something wrong with her is the only one in the movie, just like in all black.
yeah,
Like she's
pretty much.
already dressed for her funeral.
Yeah, yep. They definitely stick to a use of colors in this film.
Yeah.
That whole dinner scene, though, all of the women in this film are very good at manipulation and, you know, like the social element of things, which I think is something that modern cinema kind of doesn't modern storytelling has kind of gotten away from. I feel like a lot of times women use their social skills. I'm sorry, I'm generalizing. Somebody's going to call me out for this later. I know it, but women a lot of times they do social machinations. Like the men are like they're out doing the physical work to get things done. Women are like behind the scenes, like making the social connections to make things happen and engineering scenarios so things happen. But Catherine de Bourgh is the best example of this. The whole she knows more than anyone. She's known Darcy all of her life. She knows what he likes in a woman, and she sits Lizzie next to him so she can see how the two interact because she has suspicions at this point.
Yeah.
And then she asks her, okay, well, can you do this? Can you do this? Well, did you have a governess? Well, what about this? What about your family? Because we know that's important to him. She goes through everything that's important to Darcy. And Lizzie's like, nope, 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 nope.
Yeah. And one of the themes of the movies is just like how women are basically there to just marry someone.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it just plays on what a woman's role is just to get married. Even with Charlotte, her whole thing is hey, I'm 27 and I got nothing going on. This guy's gonna give me a happy home. But for Lizzie and what her dad ends up approving of is it actually is about love. And she does hold she proves to Darcy that she kind of holds some power over him.
Yeah. Okay, so two things. I want to hold on to the Lizzie and her dad thing for a moment because I want to circle back to Charlotte Lucas. Charlotte Lucas's character, it's not expressly stated, but the subtext is definitely, look, I'm old, I'm ugly, by their standards. This Mr. Collins dude, he's not the wife beater type. Yeah. He's probably not gonna force me to have sex when I'm not willing to.
I mean, he looks like he would burst into flames if he held her hand. So
exactly. He is that whole hardcore respect women to the nth degree, so far.
And I think I picked up, they don't touch on it much, but is he involved in the church or something? Because I think he's trying to read them the Bible or something at one point.
He's like a parson priest type thing. So in society, for someone who came from no means of her own to marry somebody who is of the cloth, being the church wife is a position of respect and importance. So it's a really good deal for Charlotte, and that's why her mom is so mad, and I think why Charlotte is such an important character. I believe all of the characters are important to Lizzie's narrative in different reasons because they reflect different things about Lizzie, and say different things about Lizzie. And I think that's what Charlotte is really meant to represent, just how ridiculous it is for a woman of her time to just have a man that is literally just he just let Charlotte do whatever, and you just have to deal with his boring sermons all the time.
And there's that first sermon he's doing after they're engaged or whatever, and he slips the word intercourse in there, and there's just that awkward moment.
And nobody laughs, and you realize that nobody's listening. And
he's so just the saddest character.
He is.
But he's kind of my favorite.
That's why I want him to have a redemption arc by the end. But circle back to Lizzie and her dad. Her dad actually says something at the very end. He's basically he says, I cannot believe that anyone can deserve you. And he tells her basically that he only cares when it's her that's getting married, pretty much.
Yeah.
The other sisters, he's just whatever. Okay, Wickham, well, at least my family won't be in disrepute, and one of the daughters is married off. Okay, Bingley, he's got money, he's shy, he's probably not a wife beater. Cool, let's go. Darcy, well, I don't know about this one. Are you actually in love with him?
Yeah, and I like the moment with the mom. He's like, well, if you agree to marry this other guy, you're gonna have one parent that hates you for if you do, and one parent that hates you if you don't.
Yes, that's the best. I love that dichotomy. It really shows where she fell in terms of the kids. I've always kind of wondered if Jane was necessarily the father's daughter, just because Jane doesn't really take after the mother or the father. Like, where did Jane come from?
Yeah, she doesn't look like either one of them. Oh, I mean, he's old and gray. Maybe he was more
Yeah.
blonde when he was
Yeah.
younger, but
Who knows?
yeah, it clearly shows that like, oh, she knows her mom is kind of crazy, but she loves and respects her dad.
Yeah.
And the scene where, you know, they finally profess their love to each other and they go talk to her dad is like a really great moment.
I love that. Just their reactions, her pacing outside, inside, him pacing outside.
Yeah, and then everybody's like, I thought she didn't like him. Like, what happened?
There are so many good scenes where you have like Darcy or Lizzie and then like the other girls in the background, and they're just like peering through, and their reactions are just the best.
Yeah, I honestly think you're talking me into liking this movie more. Like, I think I am going to try to convince my wife to sit down and watch this.
It's good. I hope you guys do, and I hope she likes it.
Yeah. So did you see it in the theater when it came out, or did you see it later on?
No, I saw this fairly later on. It was after the first Pirates movie. The reason I saw this, actually, so I liked Pirates of the Caribbean, and I really liked Keira Knightley because at the time there weren't that many actresses on the big screen that were allowed to have small boobs in film.
Yeah.
And this film it doesn't even try at any point. Like, a lot of the other films that she was in early in her career, like even Pirates, would try and like put her in these corsets that just pushed her assets up to God.
Yeah.
And it's not appropriate for that time period in the dresses, but they could have done it. They could have been put like an underbust push-up corset under there.
Yeah, and honestly, yeah, I was surprised they didn't really go for it, like
especially in the time period. This is bold in a lot of its choices for that.
Yeah, and I think it's better for it, honestly. Like, it's not about that, like, and I understand this movie was probably skewed to a more female audience anyway. But you know, not that women don't like to look sometimes, but like it would have been distracting, and it just wasn't necessary for the story they were telling. Like the Pirates movies, I get it if they're going for something like that, but this movie, I'm kind of glad it was a more like conservative look for all the characters.
Yeah, because it makes sense for all of the characters in their time period. One of the things that I see people complain about is lack of authenticity, either A, with the costumes, or B, there is one moment of cinematography that I'll discuss in a second. The first piece with regards to the costumes, bonnets. Everybody wore bonnets back then.
Yeah.
And I think I get bonnets for like stage productions and things like that, but for film, they very seldom work in any good way. It's really hard to get angles with them. I've worn bonnets before, and in photographs, it's hard to get an angle that you don't look ridiculous. And I just feel like it detracts from the emotional impact because we aren't used to seeing actors with bonnets, and we're not really used to seeing actors with like the super historically accurate hairstyles. So I think that adds like an element of like silliness that detracts from the emotional performances in a film like this.
Yeah, and it's good that they probably stayed away from that. I mean, honestly, Keira Knightley is just like stunning from like the neck up. Like her hair and her eyes are just so captivating to hide that stuff under a bonnet, I think would be a huge disservice.
Yeah, I actually used to get really mad because she's so good at acting with her eyes, and for a while, a lot of directors would focus around her mouth more, and I'm like, no, dude, like those eyes, come on, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, and even in the Pirates movies was something I noticed about her is like, oh, she's got the look, like even just eyes up, like it's just drawing your attention.
She can just get this like just deeply emotive smolder that adds to anything that she's saying or doing.
Yeah, and like you said, there was no like what's his Wickham, like as you said, there was like no chemistry there.
None.
And swapping him with Orlando Bloom I think would have been kind of great, because he did have a kind of Orlando Bloom, like I was wondering if they tried to get Orlando Bloom and he just wasn't available, because that dude has Orlando Bloom vibes.
He does. It's obvious they were going for low rent Orlando Bloom, and I think they should have just went for somebody else that had good charisma against Keira Knightley. I think what they were hoping was that if they had pictures of or video of Keira Knightley next to this guy who looked like Orlando Bloom, that an audience that would go to Pirates would also go to this film and would like it. Because honestly, I do think there is fair enough room for overlap. There's not sword fights or anything like that. If you need action and an adventure for your movie, then no, you're not going to be happy. But if you like good movies, good storytelling, things that are foreshadowed really well, that take place in a different time period and have a different sort of feel. And oh yeah, Keira Knightley's adorable. Bam, this is your movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm gonna watch this again.
I do think that this is one of those movies that I recommend everybody watch it like 2 or 3 times. It's interesting. You were the first masculine person that I have recommended this to. I've only generally recommended this to women or, femme, non-binary and male people. And it's interesting to see that yes, guys who like movies can actually like this movie. I'm glad that I'm defending my movie, and I'm really excited to see when this comes out and people get to listen to it, if other people agree with my arguments.
Yeah, and like I will definitely say like, oh, I'm sure it's not a movie for everybody. Like I'm sure
That's true.
plenty of my friends, if I recommended it to, would not get into it.
Yeah.
But if like it's definitely a good, hey, I'm gonna watch a movie with my girlfriend or wife, and I think you could get something out of it too.
Mhm.
And yeah, if you are a film fan, I think
Yeah.
there's a lot to appreciate. Just the acting, the performances, the writing and stuff. Like even if
Mhm.
it's a little out of your wheelhouse, it's worth checking out.
Yeah, definitely.
So did this make you want to watch, like, did you see like Emma or any of the other Jane Austen stuff?
So I am absurdly particular about what kind of I don't actually watch a lot of period stuff. You would think I would, but my tastes are so varied that I don't have a lot of time to watch any of one thing. So I kind of I only watch the best of each thing. My other favorite thing in this genre, if you like this, you will definitely like. It is a BBC miniseries called North and South. It is focused on the industrialization of England, and it's the main character is the daughter of a Protestant Reformation priest, and
Okay.
I like that a lot because they add a lot of underlying plots about um the poor in town and their fate because the guy that she falls in love with is actually a factory owner, so like there's a lot of ethics about factories and labor unions and or the rich versus the poor and industrialization versus the countryside. That movie or that miniseries is basically Pride and Prejudice with a ton of extra themes, and that is
Yeah.
my A plus. Richard Armitage plays John Thornton.
Oh, okay.
The actress in it is one of those women who, unfortunately, I don't remember her name, but she's one of those people that, unless you watch BBC period pieces, you probably don't know her.
Yeah.
But she's pretty good too. And
Well,
I really wish that they would redo that, or they would do like a Hollywood version of that with, maybe like some of the actors from Game of Thrones, just like literally pick any two pack from Game of Thrones that's like, a dude and a chick that look cute together and let's just go.
yeah. What was that show that everybody got so crazy about that then had a movie that was just about like the rich British people?
Oh, Downton Abbey.
Yeah, did you ever get into that?
So I like the first 2.5-ish seasons of that. After that point, the actors started to want to pursue other things because they started getting bigger roles and like more money. Since it was like a huge
Yeah.
ensemble cast, it was not a lot of money and they wanted to make money, obviously. And rather than just like writing off those characters or recasting them for a while, they just started killing everyone off. And it was just a cycle of, oh, now this guy is dead, and now this person's dead. So like as soon as you would get attached to a character, that actor would get a lot of notice, and then that character would die, and then yeah.
Yeah. I just remember there was like a period at my work where all of a sudden a bunch of
Mhm.
people were getting into Downton, and this was
Yep.
after the show had already like ended.
Yep.
It was just like everything. Oh, you actually like watch this? And I was like, I mean, no, but everybody seems to like it.
It's pretty good. I do
Yeah.
like a lot of elements of it. You know, obviously things like this, you have to understand that they are a very cleaned up version of the past, and
Yeah.
society was not this sanitized and pretty, and a
Oh,
lot of
definitely
bad
not.
things happened. But as escapism, it's definitely fun, and I like that. There's nothing in this movie that's particularly objectionable, like if you've got kids around or anything like that. There's no bad words at all, but it's still a movie that's deep and adult and has that emotional impact that few other movies you can watch in front of your children just casually do.
Yeah. I really recommend that it's just check it out. Like give it a shot. And this was like a purchase for me. I didn't rent it.
Oh wow.
I do, well, I don't know if I should say it on air, but I have a way of getting movies for like $2 sometimes. And I was just like, okay, well, I don't know if it's streaming anywhere, so I'll just see if it's available on that. And it was. So it is something I own now. And I think I'm gonna try to like give it another watch and just see if it washes over better.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I like the most about it is nothing every character has an arc, but none of the arcs jump. Like when you have a lot of characters that have arcs, a lot of times something will come out of left field or something like that.
Hmm.
Or, with Elizabeth, she keeps her feelings to herself, her deepest feelings. She doesn't even tell Jane. Jane is like completely perplexed when Darcy shows up to propose. And the audience needs to be taught that and conveyed that in ways that don't detract from the veracity of the character. And like one of the first ways you see that is like when she's with her aunt and her uncle and they show up at Darcy's and they're asking her about Darcy. And previously, every time someone had asked her about Darcy, right away she has had some snarky comment about him or some sarcastic like little quip about how proud he is and all of that jazz, but she just stumbles and she's just like he's just so rich.
Yeah.
So
And
like
like
there's
that
just little things.
they try to just make that like his defining characteristic for a while, but that's kind of the fun, is like seeing how like, oh no, he is like a human being as well.
Yeah, I
uh
love that.
yeah.
It makes you think about other people and the world inside their heads more after you watch it, which I love films that do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like, I mean, obviously it's a very old book, it's a very
Mhm.
old story, but a lot of its themes are still just so prevalent today.
Yeah. Yep.
And I guess that's why it's classic.
Yep. For
These things are
sure.
classics for reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think good love stories will never die, and I think there are so few love stories that are free of toxicity, and there's really nothing toxic about this. While Darcy, like a lot of times, if like think about a modern telling of a story like this, ordinarily you would have a scene like Darcy would do horrible things for seemingly like no reason, and then they will invent a tragic backstory, and then the tumblers will fall in love with them.
Yeah.
And with him, it is all just he's trying to be a good friend, a good person. He's doing like if you can look at things from his perspective and be like, "Oh shit, I mean, if I was Bingley's best friend and I knew that he was shy and that he was prone of being taken advantage of, and some dude just like screwed over my sister like literally last year and broke her heart, I would be really concerned that this girl whose family has no money and who is just acting completely inappropriate in high society is just going to ruin his life."
Yeah, and like all the things he's doing, like some of it
Yeah,
is just like a misunderstanding of like he doesn't know all of the story. He's just trying to look out for his friend. And then like his kind of redemptive arc is like, "Oh, well, I interfered in this situation that I didn't understand, so I'm going to try to make it right."
exactly. And he tries to make it right in a way that like he did everything possible to not have Lizzie find out that he had intervened.
Yeah, he wasn't doing it to try to like show off in front of her. It's like
Yeah.
she could have possibly never figured this out.
Yeah.
Because
And
even the wedding, even the wedding, like paying for the wedding and everything, he told them not to tell them, and she lets
yeah,
it slip.
exactly. And you see when um he and Bingley show up towards the end, right before Bingley's proposal, um Lizzie asks him a question or something like that, and you see him like he narrows his eyes like just a little bit, and he's like, you can see it, that's where his brain starts ticking. That's when he's like, wait, does she really still like me? But
Yeah.
then when he proposes, he's like, I didn't even bear hope until I found out that Catherine demanded that you promise never to agree to marry me, and you refused. And then only then did I feel like it was okay. And before I say anything further, if your feelings haven't changed, I will be silent forever. Like, he is so deeply respectful of her and her feelings and what she wants. And I love that because he still manages to assert what he wants and go after her and show that it's possible to pursue a woman without being a creep.
Yeah, it's a really refreshing way to look at a man who's just willing to do things without the expectation of reward.
Yeah, just because he knows it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. All right, well, as we're gonna be wrapping up here, so I
Yeah,
don't mean to rush us off because I feel like we
no
could
worries.
keep going.
Yeah,
Do you have any final thoughts on Pride and Prejudice that we didn't get to?
I think that's all the big stuff. I mean, I could talk about this forever, but that would be just tiny, tiny details.
Well, it was nice to step outside my wheelhouse and try something new, and that's kind of my favorite part of this podcast.
I'm glad. I am glad I convinced you. I think I defended my movie.
Yeah, oh, for sure,
Awesome.
absolutely. And
Awesome.
I hope it, not to say this wasn't like a successful movie, but it probably pulled in a specific audience, and hopefully this
Yeah.
expands that audience a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of those movies that really has endured to this day. There's still a huge fan community on Tumblr and Twitter and things like that.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that when I was looking into this. And this is why it's a good case, because like while the podcast is defending your movie, and a lot of people are going to be talking about like kind of like lesser appreciated movies, like I was surprised to see that the 1995 version is apparently more like respected than this one.
Yes, that is a big thing within the Pride and Prejudice community. So I prefer this version, and I suspect it is because I saw this version first. I don't know. I'm very into Keira Knightley, and I really think this version's good for
Yeah.
a lot of reasons. But yeah, I mean, just a lot of people think that Colin is the definitive Darcy. I don't know. Matthew
I mean,
McFadden, he
he's a
really,
fantastic actor, but I really
yes.
did like this dude in this one.
Yeah, I thought he was really good. He's great in this movie. And I like it just plenty fine. I didn't think there is this nice scene in the older version that involves Darcy stepping out of a lake in a white shirt that the ladies are very
Yeah.
fond of.
Okay.
And you know what? This movie is one of those things that I will say, like, when toxic masculinity is brought up as an example of what women want, I go like, dude, like, Darcy, watch this movie.
Yeah.
When women say they want a bad boy, they want Darcy. They want the misunderstood guy who's secretly got a heart of gold.
Yeah, not someone who's like telling them to shut up or something like that.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Not the guy that's like, show me your titch, bitch. I don't own $1 on your Twitch.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess everybody's got to shoot their shot somehow, but
Yeah, I guess.
don't be that guy.
Please don't.
I guess I have to mention this. Did you see Pride and Prejudice and Zombies?
Yes, I did.
How was that?
You
I watched
know-
the trailer afterwards just because, like, will I recognize the story in this version? I'm just like, I think I'm good.
Yeah, so yes, with an asterisk. I like nearly any telling of Pride and Prejudice because it's Pride and Prejudice and it is my special interest. I've seen like some Hallmark ones that involve dog shows that were just
Oh, wow.
objectively awful movies. But I just fucking like them for whatever reason. But yeah, I would say that's kind of in the lines of it's corny good, but I think it's not as corny good as some people think it is.
Yeah, I
That's where
remember
I'll go.
when the trailer came out, and I was like, I think I'm good on that one. But
Yeah.
I was just like, I have to, after I watched the trailer for this one, after you told me to, I was like, well, let me just pull that up because it was in the suggested list, and I was like, let me just see if this is recognizable as the story, and I was like, oh, that was a movie, I guess.
Yeah. That was certainly a movie.
Yeah, but it was funny reading the Wikipedia for it and just being like, oh, the plot is reading almost the same, but that's like, oh, and then zombies.
And then zombie. Yeah, they really do make it work pretty well though.
Yeah.
All things considered.
If that ever hits like Netflix or something, maybe I'll check it out.
Yeah, I would highly recommend also I think you would enjoy North and South. That like I said, it's a mini series. I think it's like 4 episodes. It's not it's like it's a longer than average film. What I would say is watch 1 episode. If you don't feel compelled to watch the other episodes, don't. If you do, you will probably watch them all.
Well, all right. Well, all right. I want to thank you
Very
for
welcome.
introducing. I mean, not I was aware of the movie, but getting me to watch the movie. And
My next one will not be this good. I gave you an easy one because my next film will be the 1980. I do believe it's 1982, but I might be getting that wrong. Film, the pirate movie, which is basically Pirates of Penzance meets Spaceballs.
it's called The Pirate Movie?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking this up right now. I have
Let me put it
never
this
heard
way.
of this.
The movie in its entirety is on YouTube because the original creators do not give one flying fuck about the rights to it.
Oh, wonderful.
But actually, I rewatched it the first 25 minutes the other day when I was trying to decide if I wanted to do this for my first episode with you or if I wanted to do that first.
Yeah.
It wasn't as bad as I remembered it. It's definitely one of those ones that I love for being bad. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah, right there, the pirate movie, right on the top of YouTube, just the whole thing. Not even cropped.
It's very short too. I think it's only like an hour and 17 minutes.
This says hour 38, but maybe it's just
Oh,
got
okay, maybe
credits or
I'm
something.
misremembering.
Yeah, okay. Well, at least I know what I'm getting into next time.
Yep.
Which there will definitely be a next time because I think this has been
Yes.
great.
Sweet. Awesome. I was glad to be here.
Yeah, no, I was glad to have you. And on your way out, was there anything you'd like to plug?
Yes. So I am a regular guest on the Film Rescue Show, which is where we take bad movies and we develop fixes for them. I also have a podcast of my own, which is called Palette Cleanser. We discuss movies that do not suck, movies that we have a certain sort of nostalgia about that tend to be a little bit underrated. And for the month of Pride, I'm going to be doing a show called Loki Sucks Dick, which will be on
I saw that
YouTube.
in the Discord. I'm like, what is this?
Loki Sucks Dick is a shit. So I made a joke. Okay. Seth teased me and he's like, God, Aerin, I know you do drugs, but really the initials for your podcast are called PCP. And I'm like, yeah, bitch. And my next one is going to be LSD. It's going to be called Loki Sucks Dick. And it was a good idea. So then I had to come up with a podcast and then just, Marvel is making this show called Loki and they are actually committing to making Loki bisexual. So we have decided to make a podcast.
Oh, did they say that?
Yes, he's going to
cool.
be bisexual and gender fluid. I'm using he because that's the pronouns that they've used thus far.
Yeah.
He's going to be bisexual and gender fluid.
So are we going to
and
get female
as
Loki in the show?
we are supposed to get a wide variety of different Lokis.
All right.
So I'm very excited to. I'm hoping to get an NB Loki as well, like just kind of like some androgyny going on. I think that'd be down.
Yeah.
Very curious to see how they handle it. So we are going to be doing 1 episode for each episode of that show where we not only look at the events in the show, but since that show involves time travel, we're also going to kind of discuss like queer history during that time to kind of have like a tie-in to make it evergreen content that even after the show has passed, people will still want to listen to.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that show. And now I'll have something to listen to after I watch the episodes.
If you want to follow me directly, I am at Aerin Moriarty YT on fuck Instagram and Twitter. That's what those things are called. And
Yeah.
I am occasional streamer Aerin Moriarty on Twitch.
Well, all right. Well, thank you for joining. Oh, also, I do want to point out I was a guest on the Palate Cleanser podcast when we watched the Crank movies, so go check that out.
I got really sick that week.
Oh yeah. I think I was also recovering from COVID when we recorded that. So
were you? That's
yeah. Or actually, I don't think I was recovering. I was in the middle of COVID when we recorded that.
Oh man.
Yeah, that was a fun couple of weeks.
Yeah, I felt like garbage. I wanted to be on that episode, but slept instead.
Yeah, that was like the one thing I was able to drag myself out of bed for those weeks.
Well, I'm glad you made it.
Yeah, that was a fun time. Those are great movies. But yeah, so thank you for joining. And I, since I'm recording all these ahead of time, I don't really know what to go out on other than that. But I just want to thank you for being on and thank everybody for listening.
You're very welcome. Have a great day.
See you guys later.